That. Now, any questions for either of those two speakers? Do I see any hands up? While people are thinking, Kieran, can I ask you? It's an unfair question, actually, but I mean we've had a couple of references already this morning to the major E. coli outbreak, and one obvious thought that occurs to one is that, given all this fancy technology, why do these things still happen?
That's an interesting question in the sense that one would ask, could we have prevented these outbreaks? And in a kind of a nutshell, in a sense, what the methodologies are doing is better able to detect organisms and to resolve issues much more quickly when they do develop. Because, as I said at the start, you can't guarantee 100% safety. I couldn't stand here and tell you that there will be no more food safety outbreaks. But what the research in the project has done is to be able to resolve these issues much faster. Even though 3 weeks for the E. coli outbreak in Germany seems to be a long time to the public, because of the advanced methodologies, that time was confined to 3 weeks. If we didn't have the methodologies that were developed, that time would have been much longer and there would have been much more serious consequences. So it's as much to address issues in a rapid fashion as to prevent issues from happening in the first place, although prevention is also a name of it, but we can't guarantee that 100%.
But what about the future? Obviously, you know, some of this stuff is implemented and it is there. But if you had as much take-up, as much implementation as you would like, how do you see the picture then? Would you eliminate these things entirely? I presume not entirely.
No, you wouldn't eliminate them entirely. It wouldn't be fair to say that you would. But if the traceability, microbial traceability and food traceability and detection methods, the more sensitive molecular detection methods, you would certainly have a large impact in assuring the safety of food for the consumers. Not only from a food safety perspective, but also from a quality perspective, in that if the industry have better methods for detecting the bacteria and faster methods for clearing it as being free of bacteria, the food can be released much earlier and therefore is going fresher to the consumer. So they get a double benefit, if you like, from more rapid detection methods. They get safer food and fresher food.
Kay, I think you wanted to add something. I saw your hand up there.
Just to add to Kieran's point as well, we will constantly be dealing with the movable feast. As fast as we develop technologies, bacteria will also adapt and change and develop new virulence mechanisms, and this is something that this will always happen.
Yes, it's a moving target you're shooting at, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Any questions from in the room? I apologise incidentally to the people who are seeing this on video in the other room. There isn't actually a facility for them to ask questions, unless, of course, they really have something they're desperate to ask, in which case if they get a move, they can rush up here and tear through the door and ask anything. What's the response, I mean, in general terms, if you can give it, I mean, of industry to, you come up with this new bit of fancy technology, say, look, here it is, do this, do that, and it'll have this or that consequence. Does industry greet this with enthusiasm, or does industry take the view, oh, it's something else to worry about?
Industry would address this with enthusiasm in some respects, but in other respects their hands are tied because their customers have a requirement for standard methods in terms of ISO standard methods for analysis, and currently, if you like, the standard methods haven't caught up with the modern molecular technologies, and the standard method will still be traditional methods. So in a sense, industry, while they want to use the more rapid molecular methods, have to use the standard methods that are still there. So that's the challenge, if you like, for policymakers and people that work in the higher echelons of decision making about standards, to begin to look at these modern detection methods and to incorporate them into their standard methods so that industry can use them more widely.
Yeah. We do keep coming back, don't we, to implementation and the issue that it's no use having these ideas unless the policies are there, the enthusiasm is there on the part of potential users to put them into action. I mean, do you take an optimistic view of that, or a rather doomy, pessimistic view?
I suppose in some senses I take an optimistic view of it, that so much work has been done in developing these methods, and such advances have happened that eventually the standard makers will sit up and take notice of this, because there can be such benefits from it. But it does take time to filter through the whole standardisation process, because you can't ignore the whole process of developing standards either. That has to be fully validated, and there are methods for doing that. So it's difficult to fast track that, but it can help when you have a few supporters, if you like, who are supporting the idea of molecular methods incorporated into standard methods.
Yes. Just because it's now emerged from the laboratory doesn't mean to say go instantly into use. It does inevitably, naturally.
It inevitably takes a time. But I suppose, as well as that, we as scientists can't advance that process. We can, in the laboratory, we can validate the method, we can check it out, check its sensitivity, and present these results and say this is a validated good method. Now it's your turn to do something and incorporate that into the standards. It goes out of the hands of the scientist into the hands of the standardisation making people, and we can get back to developing further technologies rather than spending our time trying to move in the area of standardisation where we're not comfortable.
Right, yeah. Anything from anyone? If not, then I guess... Oh, yes. Can you say who you are, if you could, please?
Yes, good morning. Thank you. My name is Mela Fruin. I'm Director General of Food Drink Europe, which is the organisation representing Europe's food and drink industry. I'd just like to ask a question about take-up of these methods. We have a tremendous challenge with SMEs. There are about 320,000 food-producing SMEs in Europe. Some of them are very, very small. They produce half of the food that we find on our supermarket shelves. So they're a very, very important player in the food industry in Europe. The question I had to ask was, what is the take-up of these different methodologies that you've described by SMEs? Is there a difference geographically in Europe? And how about even the language problem? Because we have, even if we come up with some tool that's very useful for SMEs, we also have a problem from a language point of view. We work with national platforms in the ETP, the European Technology Platform, Food for Life, and we do a lot of work through our national platforms, but there are huge challenges out there. So what's the take-up, and is there a best in the class, or is there something we can do better? How can we work so that SMEs can really use these tools?
Take up by SMEs.
We don't have data on the take up. We'll say of all the. I wouldn't have the data on the take up by SMEs for all the projects, because I'm representing a number of different projects. Some people at the stands might have more data on the actual take-up, but I agree with you. We don't underestimate the challenge that's involved in getting the methods across to SMEs. But I think the first step in that is to transform them into standards, because the SMEs, no more than the other bigger industry, operates by standard methods. And if something isn't in a standard method, then there won't be take-up of it, unless it's on an in-house ad hoc screening basis. But for samples that are taken for food safety determination, they have to use standard methods. So it's, I think the next stage in the process is to get the methods transferred into standards, and then there's an ongoing challenge to try and get SMEs to take them up then when they have a valid reason for doing it. But a lot of them would tend to be without